Dr. Elena Rodriguez stepped off the transport ship and looked around the research station. The metal walls were clean and bright, but the place felt cold. She had traveled for 3 weeks to reach this neutral moon between human and alien space. Her new job was important but scary. She would work with an alien scientist to study how different species could live together. Elena walked down the long hallway carrying her bags. Other humans and aliens moved around her, all busy with their own work. The station was huge, with labs and living spaces for hundreds of researchers. She had never seen so many different alien species in one place. Dr. Rodriguez? A voice called her name. Elena turned and saw her first Zephyrian. The alien was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow slightly. Her eyes were large and silver, and she moved with perfect control. I am Kethara. I will be your research partner. Elena smiled and held out her hand. Nice to meet you. Please call me Elena. Kethara looked at the offered hand for a moment before touching it briefly with her own. Her skin felt cool and smooth. I prefer to use proper titles during work time. It maintains professional distance. Of course, Elena said, though she felt a little disappointed. She had hoped they could be friendly. Kethara led Elena through the station to their shared laboratory. The room was filled with computers, scanners, and other equipment Elena didn't recognize. Everything was perfectly organized and spotlessly clean. This is our workspace, Kethara said. I have prepared research files on 17 different species for our compatibility study. We must determine which species could successfully live together on colony worlds. Elena looked around the lab. This is amazing. You've done so much work already. Efficiency is important, Kethara replied. I do not waste time on unnecessary activities. She handed Elena a data tablet. These are the human reproduction and bonding files I have studied. Your species has very strange customs. Elena looked at the files on the tablet. They were full of charts and numbers about human biology. But something was missing. These are just the physical facts. What about emotions and relationships? Kethara tilted her head. Emotions are not relevant to reproduction efficiency. My people learned this long ago. We use genetic matching to choose optimal partners for creating offspring. This system produces the healthiest children with the best traits. But what about love? Elena asked. What about choosing someone because they make you happy? Happiness is a temporary chemical reaction in the brain, Kethara said. It does not help create better children or stronger societies. Your human custom of romantic love is a waste of time and energy. Elena felt surprised by how cold this sounded. Love isn't just about having children. It's about connecting with another person, sharing your life, supporting each other. Support can be provided through logical social contracts, Kethara said. Emotional attachment makes people make poor decisions. It creates jealousy, sadness, and conflict. My people eliminated these problems centuries ago. Elena wanted to argue, but she could see that Kethara truly believed what she was saying. The alien had probably never experienced the joy of falling in love or the comfort of a partner's hug after a hard day. Let me show you something, Elena said. She pulled up a video on her personal tablet. This is my brother's wedding last year. On the screen, Elena's brother and his wife stood together, both crying happy tears as they promised to love each other forever. The crowd around them was laughing and crying too, sharing in their joy. Kethara watched the video with a confused expression. Why are they leaking water from their eyes? Are they sick? They're crying because they're happy, Elena explained. Those tears mean they're feeling so much love that their bodies can't contain it. This seems highly inefficient, Kethara said. And potentially embarrassing in public. Elena laughed softly. Maybe it is inefficient, but it's also beautiful. Look at how happy everyone is. Look at how the whole community came together to celebrate their love. Kethara studied the screen more carefully. The group bonding is interesting, she admitted. But I do not understand why this emotional display was necessary. Could they not simply sign a contract and begin their reproductive partnership? They could, Elena said. But then they would miss all of this joy. They would miss the excitement of falling in love, the happiness of planning a life together, the support they give each other during hard times. Zephyrians do not need emotional support, Kethara said. We solve problems through logic and planning. That sounds lonely, Elena said quietly. Kethara looked at her sharply. Lonely is an inefficient emotion. I do not experience it. Elena nodded, but she noticed something in Kethara's silver eyes. For just a moment, the alien had looked uncertain, almost sad. Maybe Zephyrians felt more than they admitted. They worked together for the rest of the day, comparing data about different species' social structures. Elena learned that Cathara was incredibly smart and organized. Every piece of information was perfectly filed and categorized. The alien could remember facts and numbers that Elena had to look up. But Elena also noticed that Cathara seemed puzzled by anything involving emotions or personal relationships. When Elena mentioned that some species formed lifelong friendships, Cathara asked why they didn't just end the relationship when it was no longer useful. When Elena explained that humans often chose careers based on what made them happy, Cathara couldn't understand why logical optimization wasn't enough. At the end of the day, Elena was tired but curious. She wanted to understand how an entire species could live without love and friendship. More importantly, she wondered if Cathara was really as emotionless as she claimed. "Would you like to have dinner together?" Elena asked as they finished their work. "We could continue discussing our research." Cathara paused. "I eat at precisely 1900 hours each day. I consume optimal nutrition in my quarters alone. This is most efficient. Eating together could be efficient too," Elena said. "We could share ideas while we eat. And I could cook something from Earth. You might find human food interesting for your research." Cathara considered this. "You believe sharing a meal would provide valuable research data?" "Absolutely," Elena said, though she really just wanted to spend more time getting to know her new partner. "Very well," Cathara agreed. "I will come to your quarters at 1900 hours. But only for research purposes," Elena smiled. "Of course, only for research." As Elena walked back to her quarters that evening, she thought about her strange new partner. Cathara was intelligent and dedicated, but there was something sad about her rigid life. Elena had seen thousands of sunsets, but she wondered if Cathara had ever stopped to enjoy the beauty of one. Tomorrow would bring more work on their compatibility study. But Elena had a different kind of compatibility in mind. She wanted to understand what made Cathara tick, what lay beneath all that logic and efficiency. And maybe, just maybe, she could show the alien scientists that emotions weren't weaknesses to be eliminated, but strengths that made life worth living. Elena had no idea that this simple dinner invitation would change both their lives forever. Elena spent an hour preparing dinner in her small quarters. She made pasta with tomato sauce, something simple but delicious. She also found some Earth vegetables in the station's food storage and made a salad. The smell of garlic and herbs filled her room, making it feel more like home. At exactly 1900 hours, her door chimed. Cathara stood outside holding a small data tablet and looking uncomfortable. "Please come in," Elena said, stepping aside. "Dinner is almost ready." Cathara entered and looked around Elena's quarters with interest. Unlike the sterile lab, Elena's room had personal touches. Photos of family and friends covered one wall. A soft blanket was draped over the chair. Books and small plants sat on the desk. "Your living space is disorganized," Cathara observed, but her tone wasn't critical. She sounded more curious than disapproving. "I like to call it lived in," Elena said, setting plates on the small table. "Those photos are of people I love. The plants help clean the air and look nice. The books are ones I enjoy reading again and again." "You keep images of absent individuals?" Cathara stepped closer to examine the photos. "What purpose does this serve?" Elena joined her at the wall of pictures. "This one is my parents," she said, pointing to a photo of an older couple standing in a garden. "They live on Earth, but looking at this picture makes me feel close to them. It reminds me that I'm loved." Cathara studied the photo carefully. The humans in this image appear content. They are. They've been married for 35 years and they still hold hands when they walk. Elena smiled at the memory. "This is my best friend Sarah and her daughter." She pointed to another photo. "And this is my nephew taking his first steps." "You maintain emotional connections across vast distances," Cathara said slowly, "even when these individuals cannot provide practical assistance." "Yes," Elena said. "Distance doesn't change love. These people are part of my life even when they're not here." They sat down to eat. Elena watched as Cathara carefully examined the food before taking small, precise bites. The alien chewed thoughtfully as if analyzing every flavor. "This is adequate nutrition," Cathara said after several minutes. "The taste is complex," Elena laughed. "You can say you like it. That wouldn't be unscientific." "I do not experience liking food," Cathara said. "I evaluate its nutritional value and efficiency." "But you're still eating it," Elena pointed out. "You could have stopped after determining it was adequate." Cathara paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. She looked at the pasta as if seeing it for the first time. I suppose the complexity of flavors is interesting to analyze. See? You do like it? Elena took another bite of her own dinner. Tell me about Zephyrian food. What do you usually eat? Nutrition paste optimized for individual biological requirements, Cathara replied. It contains precisely the correct balance of proteins, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals. It is perfectly efficient, but what does it taste like? Cathara tilted her head. Taste is irrelevant. It serves its function. Elena felt sorry for her. Don't you ever want something just because it's enjoyable? Something that makes you happy even if it's not perfectly logical? Happiness is a temporary chemical state, Cathara repeated, but she said it less firmly than before. It does not contribute to long-term success or survival. Maybe not, Elena said, but it makes life worth living. What's the point of surviving if you never enjoy being alive? Cathara was quiet for a long time. She continued eating, her movements becoming less mechanical and more natural. Finally, she spoke. Your species has many inefficiencies, yet you have achieved advanced space travel and scientific progress. This is puzzling. Maybe our emotions help us instead of holding us back, Elena suggested. Love makes us want to protect our families. Curiosity drives us to explore and learn. Joy motivates us to create art and music and beautiful things. Art serves no survival function, Cathara said, but she sounded uncertain. Elena got up and turned on some soft music from her personal collection. A gentle melody filled the room, something peaceful and beautiful. She watched Cathara's reaction carefully. The alien's silver eyes widened slightly. Her head tilted as she listened, and Elena could see her entire posture relax just a little. What is this? Cathara asked quietly. Music, Elena said. Humans create it for emotional expression and enjoyment. It serves no practical purpose? None at all. We make it because it's beautiful. Cathara listened in silence for several minutes. Elena could see something happening behind those silver eyes, some kind of internal struggle or awakening. It creates patterns, Cathara said finally, mathematical relationships between sounds. But also, she paused, searching for words. It produces a response I cannot categorize. What kind of response? I am uncertain. My heart rate has increased slightly, but I am not experiencing stress. There is a sensation in my chest that I cannot identify. Cathara looked troubled. This is not normal for my species. Elena felt excited but tried to hide it. This was the first crack in Cathara's emotional walls. Maybe it's beauty, she suggested gently. Maybe you're feeling moved by something beautiful. Zephyrians do not respond to aesthetic stimuli, Cathara said quickly. We eliminated such inefficiencies from our biology. Maybe you didn't eliminate them completely, Elena said. Maybe they're still there, just buried under all that logic. Cathara stood up abruptly. I should return to my quarters. Thank you for the meal. It was adequate for research purposes, but as she moved toward the door, she slowed down. The music was still playing, and Elena saw her pause to listen for just a moment longer. Cathara, Elena said softly, would you like to borrow some music files? For research purposes, of course. The alien turned back, and for the first time, Elena saw something that looked almost like longing in her eyes. I suppose I could analyze human audio patterns. For our compatibility study. Elena quickly copied several music files to a data tablet and handed it to Cathara. Start with these. They're some of my favorites. Cathara took the tablet, holding it carefully as if it contained something precious. I will analyze them thoroughly. After she left, Elena sat in her quarters thinking. Something had happened tonight, something important. She had seen Cathara respond to beauty. Even if the alien didn't understand what she was feeling, the wall of logic and efficiency had a crack in it, and Elena intended to help that crack grow. Over the next few days, their work routine changed in small ways. Elena brought coffee to share during their morning research sessions. She remembered that Cathara preferred her workspace to be exactly 22 degrees and adjusted the temperature without being asked. She listened carefully when Cathara explained complex scientific concepts, asking thoughtful questions that showed she valued the alien's expertise. At first, Cathara seemed suspicious of these gestures. She would analyze Elena's motives aloud, trying to determine what practical benefit Elena gained from bringing coffee or adjusting the temperature. But gradually, Elena noticed changes. Kithara began arriving at the lab a few minutes early when Elena was already there. She started offering Elena access to advanced Zephyrian research tools. Small things, but they felt significant. Most importantly, Elena sometimes caught Kithara listening to the music files when she thought no one was looking. The alien would put on the audio files and work with a slightly different expression on her face, something softer and more peaceful than her usual analytical mask. Elena was beginning to understand that Kithara wasn't emotionless at all. She was emotionally starved, raised in a culture that taught her to suppress and ignore feelings that were still there, still real, still part of who she was underneath all that training. The question was, what would happen when Kithara finally admitted that she could feel after all? 3 weeks into their partnership, something changed in Kithara. She began what she called an experiment in human behavioral patterns. Elena realized this was Kithara's way of exploring emotions, without admitting she was actually feeling them. It started small. Kithara began bringing Elena tea in the afternoons, claiming she was studying human caffeine dependency and social rituals. The tea was always perfectly prepared, exactly the way Elena liked it, even though Elena had never told her the specific details. "How did you know I like honey instead of sugar?" Elena asked one day. "I observed your preparation methods," Kithara replied, but there was something almost shy in her voice. "Scientific observation requires attention to detail." Elena smiled. "Of course. Very scientific." Kithara also started asking questions about human customs. She wanted to know why humans gave gifts, why they celebrated birthdays, why they said please and thank you when simple commands would be more efficient. Elena answered each question carefully, trying to help Kithara understand without making her feel foolish for not knowing. When humans care about someone, they want to make that person happy, Elena explained. Gifts and kind words are ways of showing that care. But what practical benefit does the gift giver receive? Kithara asked. The happiness of the person they care about, Elena said. That's the benefit. Making someone you love smile is one of the best feelings in the world. Kithara considered this for a long time. The emotional state of another individual affects your own emotional state? Exactly. When people I care about are happy, I'm happy too. When they're sad, I'm sad. That seems like a design flaw, Kithara said, but she didn't sound convinced. It makes you vulnerable to others' problems. Maybe, Elena agreed. But it also means you're never truly alone. You always have people who want to help you, people who share your joys and sorrows. That evening, Elena found a small gift outside her quarters. It was a crystalline flower, the kind that grew in the station's hydroponics bay. There was no note, but Elena knew who had left it. The next morning, she thanked Kithara for the flower. I do not know what you mean, Kithara said stiffly. Perhaps another researcher left it. It's beautiful, Elena said, letting the subject drop. Whoever left it has good taste. Kithara's cheeks turned a slightly darker shade of blue, which Elena was learning meant she was embarrassed or pleased. The breakthrough came during their 4th week together. They were working late in the lab, analyzing compatibility data from a difficult species pairing, when Elena started laughing at something on her screen. What is causing your amusement? Kithara asked. Elena turned her screen so Kithara could see. Look at this compatibility report. It says the Tarkans and the Velians are completely incompatible because Tarkans hibernate for 6 months, while Velians are most active during that same period. Yes, this creates obvious problems for cohabitation, Kithara said seriously. But don't you see? Elena was still giggling. It's like the universe's worst roommate situation. Imagine one species trying to sleep for half the year while their neighbors are having parties and making noise. Kithara stared at Elena for a moment. Then something extraordinary happened. Her lips curved upward in what could only be called a smile, and a soft sound escaped her throat. It was quiet and brief, but it was definitely laughter. The moment she realized what had happened, Kithara's expression snapped back to its usual serious mask. But it was too late. Elena had seen it, and more importantly, Kithara had felt it. I apologize, Kithara said quickly. That was an involuntary response. I will report to medical for examination. Wait, Elena said, standing up. You don't need medical attention. You just laughed. That's wonderful. Zephyrians do not laugh, Kithara insisted, but her voice shook slightly. It was a malfunction. It wasn't a malfunction. It was you being happy. Elena moved closer, speaking gently. How did it feel? Cathara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was very soft. It felt strange, but not unpleasant. There was warmth in my chest, and for a moment the weight I always carry seemed lighter. What weight? Cathara struggled to find words. I have always felt that existence is heavy, full of duty and obligation and the need to be perfect. But when that sound came from my throat, everything seemed less serious, less frightening. Elena felt her heart break a little. Oh, Cathara, you've been carrying that weight alone for so long. I am not alone. I have my work, my society, my function. But do you have anyone who knows the real you? Anyone you can be yourself with without worrying about being perfect? Cathara's silver eyes filled with something that looked like tears, though she blinked them away quickly. Zephyrians do not need such connections. Maybe Zephyrians do, but your society tells you that you don't, Elena said carefully. Maybe you've all forgotten how to be real with each other. You think my entire civilization is wrong. I think maybe your civilization made choices that helped you survive, but cost you something important. Something you're just now remembering you had. Cathara sat down heavily in her chair. For the first time since Elena had met her, the alien looked truly vulnerable. I have been having strange dreams, she admitted quietly. What kind of dreams? Dreams where I am not alone. Dreams where there are others around me and we are connected. Not through work or duty, but through something warmer. In these dreams, I feel peace. Cathara looked up at Elena. I wake up feeling empty, as if something important has been taken from me. Those don't sound like strange dreams, Elena said. They sound like normal dreams. Dreams about belonging, about love, about community. But why am I having them now? Why not before? Elena smiled softly. Maybe because now you know it's possible. Maybe seeing how humans connect with each other made you remember that you can connect too. They worked in thoughtful silence for the rest of the evening, but something had shifted between them. Cathara no longer hid her small gestures of kindness behind scientific explanations. When she brought Elena tea, she simply said, I thought you might like this. When Elena shared a funny story from her childhood, Cathara listened with genuine interest instead of analyzing it for data. Most importantly, Cathara began sharing pieces of herself. She told Elena about her childhood, raised in sterile education centers where emotional expression was discouraged. She described her society's matching process where partners were assigned based on genetic compatibility, with no regard for personal preference or attraction. Have you ever been matched? Elena asked one day. Twice, Cathara replied. Both partnerships produced optimal offspring as designed. The contracts have since expired. Did you like your partners? Cathara considered the question seriously. I found them competent and efficient. Our interactions were professionally satisfactory. But did you enjoy spending time with them? Did they make you laugh? Did you look forward to seeing them? Cathara paused. I do not think I understood that such feelings were possible. I accepted that partnerships were functional arrangements. But now I find myself looking forward to our work sessions. I find myself thinking about our conversations after they end. I feel disappointment when our workday is over. Cathara looked confused and slightly frightened. Is this what humans call friendship? Elena's heart warmed. Yes, I think it is. And I feel the same way about spending time with you. For the first time, Cathara smiled without trying to hide it. It was a small smile, tentative and uncertain, but real. And in that moment, Elena realized that her alien research partner was becoming something much more important than a colleague. She was becoming a friend. And maybe eventually something even deeper than that. Cathara's transformation was becoming impossible to hide. She laughed more often now, and her rigid posture had softened. She asked Elena personal questions about her life on Earth, her family, her dreams. Most surprisingly, she had begun sharing her own thoughts and feelings without clinical analysis, but their growing friendship took an unexpected turn when Cathara made a discovery in the research archives. Elena found her in the lab late one night, surrounded by old data files and historical documents. Cathara's usual composed demeanor was gone. She looked excited and troubled at the same time. Elena, Cathara said urgently when she saw her, I have found something extraordinary and terrible. What is it? Elena sat down beside her, noting the scattered documents covering their workspace. I was researching genetic compatibility patterns when I decided to examine my own species, historical data. Kethera pulled up an ancient file on her screen. Look at this. The document showed Zephyrian society from over 1,000 years ago. Elena saw images of aliens who looked like Kethera, but different somehow. They stood closer together, touched each other casually, and their faces showed clear emotional expressions. "These are your ancestors?" Elena asked. "Yes, but observe their behavior patterns." Kethera highlighted sections of the historical record. They formed pair bonds based on attraction and emotional compatibility. They created art, music, poetry. They celebrated festivals and gathered for social pleasure, not just functional meetings. Elena studied the images more carefully. "They look happy." "They were," Kethera said, her voice filled with wonder and sadness. "My species once experienced emotions as complex and rich as humans do now. We had love, friendship, artistic expression, joy. What happened?" Kethera pulled up another file, this one more recent. "A crisis. Our planet's resources were running low and the population was growing too quickly. The government decided that emotional connections were inefficient during the emergency. They implemented temporary measures to suppress non-essential emotional responses and focus entirely on survival." Elena felt a chill. Temporary measures? That was the plan. Suppress emotions for 50 years while they stabilized the population and found new resources. But the program was too successful. Within 2 generations, emotional suppression became normal. Within 5 generations, it became mandatory. Within 10 generations, we had forgotten that emotions were ever natural for us. "So your people didn't evolve beyond emotions," Elena said slowly. "You were forced to give them up. And now we call it advancement," Kethera said bitterly. "We teach our children that emotional species are primitive, inefficient, weak. But we are the ones who lost something essential." Elena looked at the historical images again. The ancient Zephyrians looked so alive, so connected to each other and their world. "Have you shown this to other Zephyrians?" "That is the problem," Kethera said. "I tried to share my findings with my research supervisor on my homeworld. I sent him a preliminary report 3 days ago." Elena felt worried. "What did he say?" "He did not respond to my scientific findings. Instead, he sent this." Kethera pulled up a new message on her screen. Elena read the official communication with growing alarm. Kethera was ordered to return home immediately for psychological evaluation and cultural recalibration. Her research was declared contaminated by primitive influences and would be destroyed. The message warned that her emotional deviation was considered a serious threat to Zephyrian social stability. "They're calling you back?" Elena felt panic rising in her chest. "Tomorrow," Kethera said quietly. "A transport ship is already en route. I am to return all my research to government control and submit to treatment that will restore my proper emotional state." "Treatment?" Elena didn't like the sound of that. "Neural modification," Kethera explained, her voice hollow. "They will remove the parts of my brain that have begun responding to emotional stimuli. I will return to proper Zephyrian function." Elena stared at her in horror. "They want to lobotomize you?" "They want to cure me," Kethera said, but tears were running down her blue cheeks. "They believe I have been damaged by exposure to human emotional patterns." Elena felt rage building inside her. "You're not damaged. You're becoming whole again. You're rediscovering parts of yourself that should never have been taken away. But what if they are right?" Kethera wiped at her tears with shaking hands. "What if these emotions make me weak and inefficient? What if I am becoming a burden to my society?" "Look at your research," Elena said firmly. "Look at what you've accomplished these past weeks. Has feeling emotions made your work worse?" Kethera considered this. "No," she admitted. "If anything, I believe my research has improved. I understand other species better now because I can relate to their emotional needs. My compatibility assessments have become more accurate." "Then they're not trying to help you," Elena said. "They're trying to control you. They're afraid that if other Zephyrians see you being happy and successful while experiencing emotions, they might want the same thing." "You think my government fears emotional freedom?" "I think any system that requires its people to suppress their natural feelings is a system built on fear," Elena said. "And I think you've become dangerous to that system because you prove it's possible to be both logical and emotional." Kethera was quiet for a long time. Elena could see her struggling with everything she had been taught about her society and everything she had recently learned about herself. "I do not want to go back," Kethera said finally. I do not want them to take away what I have found here with you. But I have no choice. I am a citizen of the Zephyrian Federation. They have authority over me. Elena stood up, her mind racing. Maybe they don't. What do you mean? This is a neutral research station, governed by interspecies law. You're here on a diplomatic mission. Maybe we can find a way to protect you. Elena, you cannot interfere with internal Zephyrian affairs. It could cause a diplomatic incident. Then we'll cause a diplomatic incident, Elena said firmly. I'm not going to let them erase the person you've become. I'm not going to let them take away your right to feel. Cathara looked at her with amazement. You would risk your career, your safety for me? Yes, Elena said without hesitation. Because that's what friends do. That's what love means. Protecting the people who matter to you. Love? Cathara's voice was very soft. Elena realized what she had said, and for a moment she felt scared. But then she looked at Cathara's face, saw the wonder and hope there, and knew it was true. Yes, she said quietly. I love you. Not as research partners or even just as friends. I love who you are, who you're becoming, who you've always been underneath all that programming. Cathara stood up slowly, moving closer to Elena. I do not know if what I feel can be called love. I have no experience with such emotions, but I know that the thought of losing you, of forgetting you, causes me more pain than I thought possible. I know that your happiness has become essential to my own well-being. Elena reached out and took Cathara's hands. They were cool and smooth, but they trembled slightly in her grasp. That sounds like love to me, Elena said. Then I love you too, Cathara whispered, and her smile was like sunrise. But their moment was interrupted by an urgent chime from the communication system. A cold voice filled the lab. Researcher Cathara, this is Transport Commander Veltan. We will arrive at the station in 6 hours. Prepare for immediate departure and data transfer. Any attempt to delay or interfere with this retrieval will be considered an act of rebellion against the Federation. Elena and Cathara looked at each other. 6 hours to find a solution, or lose each other forever. The battle for Cathara's freedom was about to begin. Elena's mind raced as they had less than 6 hours before the Zephyrian transport arrived. She pulled up the station's legal database and began searching through interspecies laws and diplomatic protocols. There has to be something, she muttered, scanning document after document. Some kind of protection for researchers or asylum laws or… Elena, Cathara said gently, perhaps you should not risk yourself for my sake. I have lived my entire life following orders. I can do so again. No, Elena said firmly, not looking up from her research. You can't go back to being empty. Not now that you know what it feels like to be alive. She found it buried in a subsection of the Interspecies Research Accords, Article 47, which protected the rights of researchers to pursue scientific inquiry, free from political interference. But it only applied if the research had potential benefits for multiple species. Cathara, Elena said excitedly, your historical research about Zephyrian emotions, it's not just about your species, is it? It could help other species too. How do you mean? Think about it. If the Zephyrians could suppress emotions through social conditioning, that knowledge could help species who have difficulty controlling their emotions. If you could learn to restore those emotions safely, it could help species who've lost touch with their feelings. Cathara's eyes widened. You are suggesting that my research has broader applications for interspecies psychological health. Exactly. That makes you a protected researcher under interspecies law. They can't force you to return home if you're conducting research that benefits the galactic community. Elena began typing rapidly, preparing a formal petition for research asylum, but they needed more than legal protection. They needed political support. I need to contact Dr. Chen, Elena said, referring to the station commander, and the Human Diplomatic Corps. Maybe even the Centaurian Embassy. They've had their own struggles with emotional regulation. Over the next 2 hours, Elena worked frantically to build a coalition of support. Dr. Chen was skeptical at first, but when Elena showed him Cathara's research and its potential applications, he became interested. The Centaurian ambassador was fascinated by the historical data and immediately offered her government support for continued research. Most importantly, they found an unexpected ally. Dr. Tavek, another Zephyrian researcher on the station, had been quietly listening to their conversations. Late that evening, he approached them in the lab. I have been observing your behavioral changes. he said to Cathara in their formal manner. Initially, I intended to report your emotional deviations to superiors. Elena's heart sank, but Tavek continued. However, I have also observed that your research quality has improved significantly. Your insights into interspecies compatibility have become remarkably accurate. This suggests that emotional awareness enhances rather than impairs cognitive function. You've been conducting your own experiment, Cathara realized. Indeed, and the results contradict our society's fundamental assumptions about emotional efficiency. Tavek paused, then did something extraordinary. He smiled slightly. I have also begun experiencing what you might call curiosity about these suppressed aspects of our nature. Elena felt hope rising. Would you be willing to support Cathara's asylum petition? More than that, Tavek said. I will request to join her research project. If emotional awareness can be safely restored to our species, it could benefit millions of Zephyrians who have never known what they were missing. When the Zephyrian transport arrived, they were ready. Commander Veltan was a typical Zephyrian official, cold, efficient, and completely convinced of his own righteousness. He strode into the station with 2 armed escorts and demanded immediate compliance with his orders. Researcher Cathara, you will surrender your research materials and submit to transport immediately, he announced in the station's main conference room. I respectfully decline, Cathara said, standing beside Elena and a room full of diplomatic representatives. Veltan's eyes narrowed. You decline? You have no authority to decline. You are property of the Zephyrian Federation. Actually, Dr. Chen interrupted, she's not. Under Article 47 of the Interspecies Research Accords, researcher Cathara has been granted protected status as a multi-species research specialist. Her work on emotional restoration has been deemed vital to galactic psychological health. This is absurd, Veltan snapped. She is suffering from emotional contamination. She requires medical treatment. The only contamination I see, said the Centaurian ambassador, is a government so afraid of their people's natural feelings that they're willing to destroy a brilliant scientist rather than admit they might be wrong. Veltan turned to Tavek, who had been standing silently in the corner. Dr. Tavek, surely you can see the danger this individual poses to our social stability. Assist me in convincing her to return for proper treatment. Tavek stepped forward, and for a moment Elena worried he might change sides. Instead, he said calmly, Commander, I have reviewed Cathara's research extensively. Her findings suggest that our emotional suppression policies may have caused significant harm to our species' psychological development. I formally request to remain here and assist with this research. You too? Veltan looked shocked. How many of our people has this human infected with her emotional poison? Elena didn't infect us with anything, Cathara said, speaking for the first time since the confrontation began. She helped us remember what we already were, what we always have been underneath the programming. This is treason, Veltan declared. This is science, Elena replied firmly. And freedom. The freedom to feel, to choose, to be complete beings instead of half-alive machines. The standoff continued for hours, but eventually, the weight of interspecies law and diplomatic pressure forced Veltan to retreat. He could not force Cathara to return without causing a major diplomatic incident. Furious but defeated, he departed with warnings about the consequences of rebellion. In the months that followed, Cathara's research attracted attention from across the galaxy. Other Zephyrians began arriving at the station, curious about the emotional restoration project. Not all of them wanted to participate, but many did. Some came seeking to understand their own suppressed feelings. Others came simply to see what their species had lost. Elena and Cathara's relationship deepened as they worked together to develop safe methods for emotional restoration. They discovered that the neural pathways for emotions were never truly destroyed in Zephyrians, only suppressed. With careful work, these feelings could be gradually reawakened without causing psychological damage. Their first major success came when Dr. Tavek experienced his first genuine laugh while watching a comedy program from Earth. His joy was so pure and infectious that it brought tears to everyone's eyes. More importantly, his cognitive abilities remained sharp, proving that emotions enhanced rather than diminished Zephyrian intelligence. The research station became a haven for emotional refugees from various species. Cathara established the first interspecies center for psychological wholeness, helping beings who had been told they were broken. learned that they were simply incomplete. Elena often found herself amazed by the transformation in her partner. Cathara had blossomed from a cold, efficient researcher into a warm, brilliant woman who laughed easily and loved deeply. She still maintained her scientific precision, but now it was balanced with empathy and intuition. One evening, as they walked through the station's observation deck watching the stars, Cathara took Elena's hand. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Risking so much to save someone you barely knew?" Elena smiled, remembering the rigid alien she had first met months ago. "I didn't save someone I barely knew," she said. "I saved someone I was already falling in love with. I just had to help you find yourself first." Cathara stopped walking and turned to face Elena. "I have been thinking about human bonding customs," she said seriously. "Specifically about the commitment ceremonies you showed me in your videos." Elena's heart began to race. "Oh? I believe I would like to participate in such a ceremony with you," Cathara said, her cheeks turning that familiar darker blue. "If you would find that acceptable." Elena laughed with pure joy and pulled Cathara into her arms. "I would find that more than acceptable. I would find that perfect." As they kissed under the starlight, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had come to this station to study interspecies compatibility, never imagining she would help an entire species rediscover their capacity for love. But perhaps that had been the point all along. Perhaps the universe had a sense of humor, bringing together a human who believed deeply in the power of emotion and an alien who had forgotten how to feel. Together they had proven that love was indeed universal, not just between individuals, but as a force for healing entire civilizations. The research station hummed around them with the voices of dozens of species, learning to understand each other better. And at the center of it all, a human and a Zephyrian had found something that transcended the boundaries of biology and culture. They had found love in its purest form, the desire to help another being become their truest, most complete self. And in doing so, they had both become more than they ever dreamed possible.